What is up, most distinguished patrons of this channel? Today I have a special treat for you. We are going to look at a welder, and not just any welder, the welder that's in this case. Now, I'm no shill for any company. I don't do sponsored reviews, and for the most part, I don't really do reviews at all, or I do my version of one. But this, technically, I didn't pay anything for it, which is kind of against the channel rules. However, bear with me. A buddy of mine bought this, didn't tell me anything about it, and then presented it to me and said the internet needs to see this thing. And I looked at it. I guess I agree with him. It's kind of a completely ridiculous situation. And I said, all right, to make you happy, I will at least try and weld with this garbage. And I would do a video where I take it and tear it down and see how unsafe potentially it is. So with that said, let's open up this. So what my buddy bought is this absolutely ridiculous welder. I'm sure that you, just like I have, seen these things before. I have never seen this particular one, and I almost guarantee you that they're all junk. But hey, I guess we don't know that if we don't test it. But he sent me a link to this, and I'll put up a picture of some of the advertisement for this, and it's all smoke and mirrors. Like, the ads are pretty ridiculous. Like, and that's unfortunately the case with, I guess he got this off of Amazon. I call them Amazon specials. Like, if it's on Amazon and it's not a name brand, odds are everything about it is probably a lie. And in the case of this, they claim a lot of things like 140 amperage. I don't believe that's going to be accurate. And everything else they mention, and I have a feeling almost all of it's just marketing wank, and they just decide to put it on there to get people to buy it. The unfortunate truth for a lot of people out there that don't know much about welding, they'll spend decent hard-earned money on something, maybe 100, 200 bucks. I don't know what he actually paid for this, but, and then you get took, and I don't like that, and that's why I don't do reviews for the companies like this, because trust me, I have probably 40 companies just like this in my emails right now trying to offer me to do reviews, and it's just not worth it because I can tell you already it's probably all junk. Now, with that said, we're going to see at least if this sucker welds in this video. In the part 2 of this video, I'm actually going to tear this whole thing down and look at how they engineered it, if there is any engineering, and get a better idea of how it works and if it's even safe to plug in the wall. So let me open this up. That's pretty cute. It's got lawn and garden gloves. I've never seen welding gloves like that. That's, huh. It smells weird too. Unreal. I like the fake gold copper plating on it. That's cute. And I don't know, jet engine back plate on it. I gotta say, this actually feels less cheap than I expected. It feels like a 3-pound hair dryer, but I mean, I guess if all else fails, you can hit what you're welding with it. And it does have, oh, it has an Intertech listed power cord. That's a shock. Which, the data plate, it has an actual data plate on it. Of course, I did a whole video on data plates, and I kind of always laugh about that because, like, this has a data plate on it, but it's not to any particular standard, so it pretty much is meaningless. But we'll take a look at that in a minute. Manual. Got a ground clamp, uses small DINS connectors. Ground clamp isn't the worst I've seen. It actually has a decent spring. Ooh, what are these? 6013s? Oh, they're stuck in there. Well, I'll get this all cleaned up and come back. So I did a quick little look through this manual and found some interesting details on this. First off, they claim that it's capable of a 60% duty cycle at 115 amps. And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't believe that for a second. And the reason isn't so much the machine itself, and it's more or less the breaker that it's hooked to. This thing, even though it doesn't say it in here, according to the data plate, its effective amperage loading on a 120 volt, or well, it says 115 circuit, is 32 amps. And with the poor power factor, they claim it's 0.73 for power factor. It's claiming 40 amps would be the maximum. And basically, for those of you who don't know, a lot of these cheaper welders more or less grossly overload 120 volt breakers, and they rely on the fact that a controlled overload of, say, 30 amps over a period of 20 to 30 seconds won't cause a breaker trip. The unfortunate truth is that you really can't get any kind of production out of most of these simply because the breaker's going to trip due to thermal overload before the machine ever has an issue. Now, I also find it very interesting. They call it the ARC 140, yet it's 115 amp rated. I knew for a fact that it's impossible to get 140 amps of output on a device like this on a 20 amp breaker, so it says 115. Realistically, based on what they claim its power factor and its efficiency of 85%, I don't think that you would be able to get much beyond maybe a 80, 90 amps at a 40 to 50% duty cycle. So again, this is all hocus pocus BS. It's not accurate to what you actually are buying. Now, there's some other things that I find rather interesting. One of which is this shows positive where the ground clamp hooks up and negative where the electrode goes. And that's rather interesting because here in North America, where we have 7018, 6011, 6013, you guys also from all around the world typically have 6013 as well. But we run rods universally on electrode positive. So your electrode would be here, and this would be the positive, not the negative. This is depicting what would be incorrect polarity for almost every rod in North America. Now, a couple guys have commented in comments on previous videos where they say, well, we run 6013 in our country electrode negative, and that's cool that you do. I'm just telling you that the rods in this country don't run that great electrode negative, and as a matter of fact, electrode negative universally reduces welding penetration. It will penetrate less, which is great on sheet metal, bad on anything else. So the unfortunate case of this is it, at least on face value, appears to be the wrong polarity to weld with most electrodes here. And to make matters worse, there's no real easy way to change the polarity. It came with some rods that I've never personally ran, which are called J422. Which these I've heard from numerous sources weld like 6013s, and I've also heard from numerous people that they don't weld like 6013s. I apologize for the noise. I'm running on a generator here in the tin shed, so to test this, you're going to have a little bit of a generator noise for a short time. So anyways, I got on a 30 amp circuit, 30 amp 120 volt circuit, and I have a feeling that this thing is just going to trip the generator's breaker. Well, let's plug it in and see what we got. Kind of made a popping noise. That's not a good sign. Let's see if it turns on. Hopefully it didn't trip the breaker. Oh, there we go. Look at that. So the bottom end is 20 amps. And, oh, 140. Yeah, that's pretty funny. So it goes to 140, but that probably is more like 90 would be my guess, but we'll find out. In part two, I'll actually test it. We're just going to see how this thing welds for the time being. Since this is likely not accurate, a normal 6013 welds at probably 60 to 70 amps. I'm going to set it at like 90 and see what we have. Now, keep in mind, this thing, I don't know if any of this is electrically live. It shouldn't be, but you got to be careful with this. So I'll set that there, clamp this up, put my gear on, and we'll do a little weld on this and see if it actually welds. You know what? I talk junk about these gloves. I mean, they don't fit the best, but hey, I got huge hands, and these things fit me better than I thought. I'll have to take them to work and go weld some pipe with these and see how long it takes before someone comments on how stylish they are. I gotta say, this is pretty awkward holding this sucker. You know, you wouldn't want to make a habit of it, but hey, let's see if this sucker welds. Well, it welds. It definitely seems to be electrode negative just by the sound of it. Let me clean this up and let's take a look. So here's the weld that we put down here, and I learned a couple things even in this short of a weld, and I didn't do any off-camera welding. I just basically chucked it up, and what you get is what you get. First thing I noticed is this does not have an easy start, like they claim easy start. That's pretty much bogus. It was actually pretty difficult to get the rod started, likely because the open circuit and operating voltage on it is so low that it's very hard to strike an arc. You have to be very deliberate and very tight arc gap to get it to work. With a more legitimate stick welder, it's a lot easier to get the initial arc started. The other thing that seems to be bogus as well is hot start. The start of this weld did not seem to have any boost in amperage like you would expect with hot start, so that likely is not true as well. So I did a bunch of test welds. Here was our first one. These I was screwing around with the settings. I got it to run a little bit better, but if there's one thing I learned about this machine is the start on this is pretty difficult and it's very cold. So every start I had was just ice cold. I also noticed a weird tendency where it was almost like the weld current was pulsing, and I don't mean many times a second, but as I was welding, it was like the current dropped a little bit, the pool got a little bit colder, and then it would ramp back up. It was subtle, but I noticed it. It was like every 3/4 of an inch, even though my travel speed was consistent, like it would wet out and then cool off, wet out. And I see that in this rod, the 422, I grabbed some 6013, actual Brandon 6013, and you can definitely see it. Like basically every 3/4 of an inch or so, it just got like super hot and then it would fluctuate. Same thing here. Same thing here. It was more noticeable with 6013 than it was with the other rod. This is about the best weld that I had. There's still some flux on it. And ice cold start. That doesn't look too bad. But I can tell you what, in North America, this machine with the rods that are commonly available, you're going to have a hard time making decent welds with this. It doesn't really weld that good, and it's just too inconsistent on the amperage output. Now, in case you're wondering, here's a 7018 332. I maxed the machine out and tried to run it, and I couldn't even get a arc start. I tried it at a 90 setting on that, 140 setting. Literally, it would not start the arc. I could barely get a flash. Luckily, it doesn't seem to stick that bad. A lot of times with stick welders, cheap ones, when you strike it and you try to, it just instantly sticks and that's it. So it's not that it really stuck hard, it just doesn't seem to be able to supply enough amperage. And also 100% it is welding on electrode negative. I can tell by the arc and the starting characteristics, everything. So again, you're pretty limited with this. For whatever this costs, sub $100, you can do a lot better than this for a functional stick welder. Which kind of makes me wonder, since this thing is kind of pre-screwed and set up for electrode negative, maybe I could TIG weld with this. So I'm going to go grab my scratch start TIG rig, clamp it to the output of that, and see if I can't do some TIG welding with it. I bet it would work, and it probably would do a better job than the stick welding. I'm going to start at what it claims is 100 amps, which I would take a guess and say is 70. It indeed TIG welds. The arc has a lot of flutter to it. It's not as smooth as like a traditional TIG welder or even most DC stick welders that I've welded with. It is definitely on the cold side, so 100 is probably closer to 60. Let me just go up to 140 and give that a shot and see what I can do. Well, guess what? It can TIG weld as I expected. It does have a weird quality to the arc. The best way I could describe it is it's like a wobble. It's almost like some AC current is leaking through the output, and I won't get into specifics, but this thing's basically it's engineered like trash. We'll just put it that way. But its DC output is not very smooth, and what I'm seeing is in the arc is kind of like a ramp up and down in voltage, and it creates a flutter almost effect to the arc, which in most cases probably wouldn't be an issue, especially if it had higher amperage output, it'd probably lessen the effect. But at lower amperage output, what happens is the molten puddle, it doesn't have clean defined lines. It's almost like it's agitating the puddle. So it's not something I would want to make a habit out of TIG welding with, but it will. Now my gas flow is a little bit low for that giant cup I had on there, and I was too lazy to crank it up. But doing a single pass bead comes out real clean. When I tried to weave it, it's starting to basically oxidize because the gas coverage is just not enough. The flow's too low. But I was able to get decent results doing that. The single pass here is very clean. Again, the puddle doesn't look like a normal TIG welding puddle. It has a flutter to it. But yes, the truth is you can TIG weld with this sucker. So to end this video, I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to find a way to clamp this output onto the plate, and then I'm going to try and stick weld on DCEP and see if I can get a little bit better of a stick weld than what I previously did. So I got the ground clamp holding the electrode, clamped it to the electrode holder there. Let's see if I can get a little bit better results with this sucker. Well, with the switch polarity, it does weld better, but it still has this weird like flutter and fluctuation to the arc, and it's more pronounced with stick welding than TIG welding. And it could be because stick welding operates at a higher voltage and it's putting more of a load on the machine, that maybe the input voltage is dropping and thus it's kind of having a hard time maintaining the output. I don't know, but I can tell you that it's probably the strangest arc I've ever seen because it's like the molten puddle changes in how liquid it is every, like, I don't know, 2 seconds. It goes from more liquid to less liquid, and it makes it very difficult to get a decent bead. When I dropped the amperage down, it smoothed out a lot. Like this guy, I didn't see it as much, but when it was hotter, up higher, it definitely was very noticeable. And let's just face it, this thing really isn't designed to get kind of decent results, to be honest. And with this 6013 rod, it doesn't run good enough. The only rod that I feel would run decent is the ones it came with, which guess what? Good luck getting those. Well, does it weld? Yes. Does it weld good? No. Is this something I would recommend? Absolutely not. Would it stand in as a prop for a sci-fi cosplay or something? Absolutely, this would. I gotta say, like, the look of this thing actually tickles my pickle for some reason. I don't know why. I'm a big steampunk fan, and just looking at this makes me giggle inside. Unfortunately, it's not really worth much as a welder. Now, TIG welding on this works as I expected and pretty good, all things considered. So is this something I would hang on the side of my welding table with a scratch start TIG rig for just, I don't know, random projects that I need a short TIG weld? Yeah, I could use that for this. I wouldn't use it as a stick welder. It's simply too cumbersome, too awkward to use. I mean, bending the rod helps a little bit, but I got to tell you, this is the hardest to start welder I've ever used. In a previous video where I tested a welder from the 40s, that thing, which was difficult to start a rod, was way better than this. I mean, this, if you don't have a substantial amount of skill, good luck. You're going to be sitting there all day. On a plus side, at least it doesn't really stick the rod, aka the current doesn't max out and it just melt the rod. It just doesn't have enough power for that. So it's not like it's hard to break the stuck rod off. It's just, it doesn't want to start. Now in part 2 of this video, I'm going to actually meter the input, the output, get an idea of efficiency, get an idea of what the actual output is, calculate the power factor, and I'm also going to tear this down and look at it because I have a feeling there's some questionable engineering in here at best. Also, I wouldn't recommend their gloves that they came with. Now, I was an idiot and had my finger pretty close to what I was welding, but these things seem to catch on fire, melt through, and then stay on fire. So that's no good. I would not recommend using these gloves for anything other than gardening, which is kind of unfortunate because they shockingly fit me and my big hands, but they're kind of useless for welding. Find a different use for them, unless you want to set yourself on fire. So with that said, I had fun making this video. I know my buddy's going to be happy that I finally tested one of these because he's been harping on me for doing some kind of ridiculousness like this. So he's happy. Hopefully you are too. With that said, if you have any comments, thoughts on this, opinions, feel free to leave them. Until next time.